Hey Star Trek fans, Dan Gunther here. Welcome to my review and deep dive for the Star Trek Prodigy episode Mindwalk. Now, I haven't done one of these videos in some time, and this is the first one I've actually done for Star Trek Prodigy. As we're nearing the end of season 1 of the show, I thought it was finally time to make one of these videos for this wonderful show that I've really been enjoying. I think Star Trek Prodigy is an incredible addition to the Star Trek universe and has really shattered my expectations for what this show could be. So without further ado, let's talk a bit about this specific episode, Season 1, Episode 18, Mindwalk, written by Julie and Shauna Benson and directed by Sung Shin. As season 1 of the show has progressed, the show has just gotten better and better, and this episode in particular, I think, benefits from all that came before it in showing us how far these characters have come and advancing the story in new and unexpected ways. There are a lot of things that have happened in this first season that I wasn't expecting to have happened already. We learned the initial premise, of course, was that this group of kids was aboard this starship being chased by Starfleet because they think they've stolen it and all of this sort of thing. And I by no means expected that towards the end of this season, Starfleet would have caught up with them, Admiral Janeway would have met these children and gotten to know them, and we find ourselves in a completely different situation at the end of this episode. Much like episodes that came before it, the story advances in leaps and bounds with each part of the tale being revealed to us. So my kudos really has to go to the writers of Prodigy for advancing this story and making it so that there are real stakes. You know, I think a lot of us, fans of my age certainly, are used to that style of storytelling where the premise doesn't really change very much from episode to episode. I think of shows such as Inspector Gadget, where, you know, by the end of the episode, Gadget and Dr. Claw will have had some sort of conflict, but by the end, we just get that Dr. Claw saying,
"Next time, Gadget. I promise I'll get you. Next time."
And everything is kind of reset for the next episode so that the two of them can square off once again. However, with this show, like I said, the premise changes week to week as new things are learned and new events happen. So huge props to the writers for crafting this very engaging story with real stakes that has me wondering each week what is going to happen next. So in this episode, we have the Dauntless and the Protostar coming together, with the Dauntless chasing the Protostar. The Protostar is set course to some unknown location, presumably to maximize the effectiveness of the weapon it carries against Starfleet. The kids decide to use Dal's latent telepathic ability to try to contact Admiral Janeway. Now, from a few episodes ago, Admiral Janeway has been knocked out and stuck in a closet by the Diviner and who we know as Ensign Essentia, but who is actually another Vaughn Akot who is undercover. Dal does manage to make mental contact with Janeway, but there's an unforeseen circumstance in which they switch minds, and we get kind of a classic Freaky Friday type story here with Dal in Janeway's body and Janeway in Dal's body. Now, my huge props have to go out here to Brett Gray and Kate Mulgrew, who both do amazing jobs playing the other character. And it's so clear how much work and love went into this performance. I mean, the real highlight, of course, is Kate Mulgrew getting to do these kind of over-the-top things that Dal would do. And it certainly is fun to see and hear Janeway reacting as she does in this episode as Dal. But I think we should not give short shrift to Brett Gray playing Janeway in Dal's body, whose understated performance is pitch perfect. There are so many moments where you can totally imagine Janeway acting and saying exactly the things that Dal does in this episode. So great performance by both of these actors. And of course, the animators for doing the actions. So well done. So top marks to this episode. Again, by the end, we have this situation where the Protostar is amongst a huge fleet of Federation starships, and it's clear that this weapon poses an immediate threat to Starfleet and the Federation. As I said earlier, we once again are thrust into a new situation. Circumstances have changed. The entire premise of the show is different by the end, and I cannot wait to see what happens in the next episode. So let's jump into some of the Easter eggs and continuity connections that were in this episode. So first of all, while at warp, the Dauntless merges warp bubbles with the USS Protostar. This was very reminiscent of the episode Divergence from Star Trek Enterprise's 4th season, where Enterprise and Columbia must merge warp fields in order to transfer Trip between the two ships. Now, in that episode, Trip had a tether and was significantly safer than Dal/Janeway is when he launches away from the Dauntless without a tether towards the Protostar, which is kind of a, butt-clenching moment. But yeah, that really reminded me of this situation in Enterprise. I also love the part where Rock Talk suggests they reconfigure the main deflector to emit a tachyon beam to communicate with the Dauntless. And in what seems to me to be poking fun at Star Trek itself, Jankum Pog says, "Oh, sure, bleep bloop." Yeah, Jankum doesn't know how to do that. So many times we've seen in Star Trek where they reconfigure the main deflector dish with just a few button pushes. Voyager was especially egregious in this area, making huge modifications to some piece of equipment that's not designed to do what they're trying to get it to do. But yeah, it's just a few button pushes on the bridge and that's done. But of course, yeah, Jankum doesn't know how to do that. As I said, this is a body switching episode. The first Star Trek body switching episode we got was the original series' final episode, Turnabout Intruder. Probably the less said about that episode, the better. More recently, we got one in Strange New Worlds, Spock Amok, where Spock and T'Pring switched bodies, and of course, hijinks ensued. So it's kind of funny to have this following so closely on the heels of that episode. But I think, like I said, this episode does it so well that it does not feel like we're retreading old ground here. This isn't so much an Easter egg as just a kind of fond remembrance of Kate Mulgrew in a sort of similar role. She really is over the top and amazing here as Dal. Some parts of it reminded me a little bit of the Voyager episode Renaissance Man in season 7, when the Doctor took on Janeway's form. There's a couple moments where she acted a little odd and was whispering to an unseen person who is listening in. Reminded me a little bit of some of the stuff in this episode, but nothing approaching the performance that she has to give voice-wise as Dal. Amazing moments. The finger guns, of course, are classic. And I loved her line, "I changed my mind." Not in a weird way, in a totally normal way. When we learn in this episode how it was that Dal was able to kind of switch minds with Janeway, we get a reference to the Organians taking over other bodies. This would seem to be a direct reference to the Enterprise episode Observer Effect, where we see Organians taking over the bodies of various Enterprise crew members. In what might be one of my favorite references to Trek of the past now in New Star Trek, we get Janeway giving the line that she was once turned into a salamander, referencing the memorable Season 2 episode of Voyager, Threshold. No mention of her and Paris's offspring, however, but yeah, there's not really an opportunity for that subject to come up in this episode, I don't think. The charades scene is certainly a lot of fun. I think this might be the first time we have seen a game of charades in Star Trek, but I could be wrong about that. The characters also learn from Janeway that due to Dal being an augment, he will not be allowed into Starfleet. Now, this is a plot point that has been around for quite a while. Of course, Dr. Bashir dealt with this in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and it's something that I notice that the new era of Star Trek has begun to tackle on a more kind of regular basis here. It's obviously become a central plot point to Una in Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and now, of course, with Dal. I feel like there's kind of this common theme that's running through these shows. So I'm very curious to see where this goes, tackling the idea of discrimination based on genetic augmentation, I think is kind of an interesting path for these shows to take. Thanks to Tristan Schwartz in the Positively Trek discussion group for catching this one. We get what would appear to be a reference to a very famous clip from The Simpsons, the episode in which Principal Skinner serves steamed hams to Superintendent Chalmers, where Janeway, or Dal in Janeway's body rather, is caught kind of acting weird, and he pretends to do stretches to cover the fact, stretching her calves and that sort of thing. Very reminiscent of that scene from that Simpsons episode. Very hilarious that they would seem to be referencing that. At the end of the episode, we see the Protostar come face to face with a Federation fleet. Now, there are a number of starship classes in this fleet that I was able to pick out. We have Sovereign class, which of course is the class of the Enterprise E. Akira class, first introduced in Star Trek First Contact. Centaur class, first introduced in the Deep Space Nine episode A Time to Stand, and a number of Defiant classes, the most famous being the namesake of the class, the USS Defiant from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and of course the Dauntless joins the fleet at the end. And once again, as I've said, we get this cliffhanger with Janeway in the brig, so it's not clear how much help she's going to be to the kids when all is said and done, but like I also said, I am very eager to see where this all goes from here. So, thank you all so much for watching this video. Were there any Easter eggs or continuity references that I missed? Please reach out, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you, as always, to the Patreon supporters of the channel. I really could not do these without you. Thank you so much. Hoping to get these videos back on a regular basis. Kertrats Productions is not done. We are coming back with new videos. The new year, I'm hoping to really reboot the channel and do some fun stuff. So hang in there. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, live long and prosper.